Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As we welcome you to the special broadcast, which is going to be taking place every Wednesday evening, inshallah, during the month of Ramadan. And we trust and hope that you are having a wonderful Ramadan, inshallah, filled with the mercy and the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we've entered this month of Ramadan, one would never ever have thought what we will be witnessing, what we have witnessed in the last week or so, the US Israeli attack against Iran. And obviously, this has raised many questions with regard to the legality of these attacks under international law as well. But clearly, what this has done is it sparked something a lot bigger as well. Apart from the US and Israeli attacks on Iran, it's actually sparked even a regional war where we've seen many of the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, Jordan, many of these countries. And one would never have thought that so many Muslim countries would actually be part and parcel of this aggression during this month of Ramadan. And this comes obviously immediately, and I'm not too sure whether there is a connect between what has been taking place between Pakistan and Afghanistan. But clearly, this Ramadan has been a Ramadan where once again it's filled with conflict, and this is the reason why we are having this special broadcast tonight with my esteemed panel of guests this evening. And shortly, we will be joined by Prof. Junaid, Ahmed, Dr. Jazbhay will be joining us as well, and Brother Taufeeq will be joining us as well. And I see Prof. Junaid is already on, who's the director of CSID. Assalamu alaikum to you, Prof. Welcome to the show, and trust you're having a good Ramadan.
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Junaid. As always, a wonderful pleasure to be with you.
Yes, and the MRNs, Dr. Ahmed Jazbhay. Assalamu alaikum, Ramadan Kareem to you as well, and welcome.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you and your listeners. Ramadan Mubarak, and shukran for having me.
Taufeeq Hoosen, sorry, Taufeeq, I got your name wrong earlier on when I introduced the show. My apologies for that, but Jazakallah for your time as well. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, Brother Junaid, and God bless to all. Hello to everybody that's also non-Muslim as well. So, yeah.
Yes. Prof, obviously you've been analyzing the global political dynamics that have been playing out, and especially looking at some of the recent developments. Now, before we get into what we'd like to discuss and looking at the legality of this aggression against the Islamic Republic of Iran, I just want to take a step back. And obviously, we've seen a sequence of events taking place. We've seen what has taken place in Venezuela, a regime change in Venezuela, the arrest of Nicolas Maduro and his wife as well. And then immediately thereafter, we've seen what triggered a war between Pakistan and Afghanistan, and now in Iran. And I'm not too sure whether there is a connect, but the connect obviously is one key player, and that is the United States of America, one man in particular, Donald Trump.
Yes, brother. I mean, what one can say that when we were speaking about earlier, the legality of all of this, and that issue we will come to later. One thing that seems to be pretty obvious is that law, specifically international law, has been thrown out of the window in this new year of 2026. You mentioned the kidnapping of a president, a sovereign president, that is Nicolas Maduro from Venezuela. That's even before this direct intervention, the soft intervention in Iran, where many of the protesters there, supported by Mossad, CIA, MI6, who even bragged about it. So one thing that we should be clear about is that, unfortunately, international law is being contravened left, right, and center, especially by the United States, which, of course, for the past, since World War II, presented itself as the defender. I mean, many of these international legal documents, it was well, many of them it wrote itself. So what we're seeing is the unmasking moment of all of these kind of liberal pretenses to kind of human rights, democracy, upholding the UN Charter, especially Article 2, which prevents illegal aggression. And so, brother, this is what we have been seeing so far. And of course, its culmination now is this massive, terrorist assault against Iran. So we've not started out on a very positive note in this year.
Well, certainly. And let's just get Prof. Dr. Ahmed Harun's take on this. Clearly, Dr. Harun, we know that from a legality perspective, this is not a lawful self-defense because this is an armed attack on Iran. This was not authorized by world organizations like the United Nations Security Council as well. But again, when one looks at all the issues that are playing out, whether we're talking about preventive disarmament of Iran and its nuclear stockpile, whether we're talking about counterterrorism, whether we're talking about regime change. Now, all of these constitute one thing from a legal point of view, international crime of aggression.
Yeah, of course, in my opening salvo would be pretty much that, international law is dead. In fact, I argue that it's never been alive to begin with. It was never conceived to protect those in the global south. It was the liberal institutional order as we know it was conceived after the World War II. And we know that the World War II was primarily a Western war. And after the Holocaust, they needed to come up with a international system that would prevent any future genocide of white Europeans. We know the Holocaust primarily was a genocide of white Europeans in Germany and surrounding countries. So international law was never meant to protect the rights or the likes of the Iranians or the Venezuelans or the Iraqis and so on. And, you asked the question at the beginning, is there a link between these issues, Venezuela, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and now Iran? And I'll argue to some extent there is, because perhaps the Americans wanted to, ensure that there's enough oil supply in the market, because now they're pretty much controlling the oil supply of Venezuela and so on, and who it's being sold to, and so on. So there is pretty much a link to this. Of course, oil price has shot up quite exponentially, but that is likely, we don't know which way that's going to turn in the next few weeks and months ahead. So what we're seeing is, the undressing of the international order. The international order as we know it, I know many are desperate to cling to it. International order, especially a country like South Africa, is desperate to cling to the liberal institutional order, perhaps multilateralism as a cornerstone of liberal institutional order. But I would think it's naive to say so, and we need to start imagining an alternative world order.
Well, certainly. And also, I think let's just bring Taufeeq into the discussion. Taufeeq, I know you've written extensively already on what has been playing out, and it is clear that Iran did not attack the United States or Israel prior to these strikes. And we've seen this act of force, which is completely unjustified as well. And again, there are many international law experts that are also talking about there is sufficient grounds to believe that the attacks against Iran amount to nothing but a crime of aggression.
A way to pick up on what you all had to say before me, and what actually stood out is the failure of international law and the United Nations. You see, the United Nations is the toothless body. It's basically a body that's put into place with the imbalance of veto powers. So basically, you've got the USA, Israel, which actually vetoed peace in countries like Africa and stuff. So we must make a note of that there as a failure of international law and take the United Nations as being redundant. Then I think it was Professor Junaid that actually mentioned something about the petrol price and stuff like that there. You see, if we go down to the 1950s, we have to go to the establishment of the petrodollar system. And if we understand the history and the establishment of the petrodollar system and how it infiltrated the Middle East, we will now understand the economic war and the economic factors at play that's causing this division in the Muslim world. So yeah, we must reflect on that.
Well, certainly. Also, Prof. Junaid, I think one of the most important things, and this was a statement that was also made by Donald Trump, and he talks about an imminent attack by Iran. Now, clearly, there has been absolutely no evidence whatsoever of an imminent attack or even a preemptive strike as far as Iran is concerned. And just looking at it legally and from an international law perspective as well, in terms of how imminence or an imminent attack is actually understood according to international law.
Right. And I think that we should welcome this as perhaps the first statement by the Trump administration, even trying to make an argument from international law. One recognizes this when Marco Rubio all of a sudden invokes the term imminent. And so now they're trying to give it somewhat of a legal veneer, although, like I said, they really do not care about these things. And this is, in fact, the conundrum that we face, is that we are really literally dealing with a Trump administration. I mean, put Israel to the side, that has never believed in anything of international law, whatever toothless UN resolutions that have been, and they're numerous, sanctioning Israel. Nothing has ever been done about that. But we also now have this Trump administration, which also, makes no pretense of living up to international law. And so when we're talking about this, the worst crime, according to the Nuremberg principles, the crime of aggression, it's just taking place in front of our eyes. And in some ways, this is just the next step after the genocide in Gaza, something all of us know, live streamed in front of us, every single international aspect of international law violated daily, and nothing was done about it. And I think that this is a continuation of that process. And in some ways, these are the last gasps. I know this is difficult to swallow, but these do seem like the last gasps of the project of both Zionism and the American empire coming to an end. Now, again, that process can be 2 years, it can be 20 years, and so on. But we do see this very flagrant violation of all these international laws and basically doing whatever it takes to entrench the Zionism and empire in the region being implemented in front of our eyes. And it doesn't seem like people, any of the nation states at least, are willing to confront it. In fact, the opposite is happening. Once something like this goes into motion, no matter how much, for example, the Gulf regimes said, well, we were telling them not to do this. This was going to destabilize everything. The Trump administration goes ahead with it. And then it seems like everyone, once again, becomes quite complicit in what's going on.
Well, certainly. And also, I think, Dr. Jazbhay, when one looks at the modus operandi, and one can actually draw a lot of parallels with what has taken place in Gaza, where initially, when the genocide had started as well, and we see how Iran is being targeted as well, brutally in many sense of the word, taking out leadership. We've seen this. We've seen that happen with Hamas. We've seen that with the assassination and the killing of Ismail Haniyeh and the other leaders in Hamas. We've seen some of the leadership that were killed in Lebanon as well. We see the modus operandi exactly the same. Ayatollah Khamenei as well, and also his family. So we are seeing a trend and also parallels that one can actually draw between what took place in Gaza and what is now playing out in Iran. And over and above that, not only taking out the leadership, but also we've seen what has happened with the school, that 100 and somewhat young little children that were killed, hospitals that come under attack as well. So a lot of similarity in what we see in these acts of aggression taking place.
Yes, of course, we're dealing with the same enemy here. The Gaza genocide was a genocide perpetrated by Israel, supported primarily by the United States of America and its Western allies. Now, we see this aggression in Iran started off by the Israelis and the Americans, now supported by the French, supported quietly by the Gulf Arab nations and so on. So it's the same modus operandi. And, targeting leadership, as you rightfully pointed out, it seems that it's as if they never learned the lesson. From Iraq in 2003 to the various assassination of Hamas leaders, starting with Sheikh Ahmed Yassin, Abdul Aziz Rantisi, Ismail Haniya, Yahya Sinwar, and so on. It's the same modus operandi. It's assumed that you deal with the leadership, that the resistance would die out, and we've seen it in Gaza. We've seen it, in Iraq. We've seen it in Gaza, and so on. It never dies out, and the same principle applies in Iran. I mean, the Ayatollah Khomeini knew that he was a target. He knew he was a target that he didn't even bother, going into a bunker when he was told to move to a safer place, because he said that if he goes in the bunker, 90 million other Iranians don't have that luxury of going into a bunker. So he stood firm. So going after leadership has never proven to be a successful way of conducting warfare by Israel and the Americans. Yet they continue with this. So whoever comes in after Khomeini, whoever even if the current president is assassinated, whoever comes in after that, the resistance continues against the Israeli and American entities. We know that that Iran is the last bastion of resistance to this greater Israel project, that is spoken about, and which Mike Huckabee, the ambassador of the US to Israel, spoke about. And he said that, if Israel had taken the entire Middle East, that would be fine. So, all these issues are related. And ultimately, this is about furthering the agenda of Israel and its greater Israel project.
Well, certainly. And also, I think Taufeeq, when one looks at the arguments that have been presented, the scattershot arguments, particularly by somebody like Donald Trump, where he talks about freedom for the Iranian people, and we know they encourage the demonstrators to take over government buildings. They promised them a way out. They even had the son of the Shah of Iran at one point in time prepared to take over, which obviously Trump later on backtracked on. But again, what this tells us that the international law is thrown out of the window, and it is more like embracing military power, because again, it's reliance on brute force of the US military power together with the likes of Israel, the Zionist entity of Israel, to promote this global agenda that is playing out.
Okay, based on what you're saying, I'd actually like to, I'm not too sure which actually Pan-Africanist leader it was, but he said that your colonizers will return as investors. So it's basically happening now in fast forward. But you see, this issue of this war is actually all over the place. And I personally would like to actually break it down into the economic factors, the political factors, as well as the social factors at play. And then I'm going to take it one step further into the social factors of giving the religious factors that are influencing. On one hand, you've got the greater Israel agenda. On the other hand, you've got the division between, well, I don't want to actually mention the different sects, but yeah, but people capitalize on all that there, and people like Donald Trump actually used that as leverage in actually causing a destabilization, as they actually attempted in Iran actually before this. So we have to break the issues down and actually, and the last issue with regards to, I think that's a direct reflection of why certain leaders are actually taken out. And as I said, it still goes back to 1950 that causes the whole. If you look at Jordan split, it's more US backed. If you look at, well, basically, in my opinion, the war actually never stopped for the past 50 years. So we have to break it down and look at it in a much more micro glass, if you know what I'm saying.
Yes, Taufeeq. But also, I think, Professor Junaid, one obviously needs to measure this against international law versus the rules of war. And I'm not too sure why Prof. Junaid is not on screen. I'm hoping Prof. Junaid, oh, there we go. Prof. Junaid is with us on screen. Just in the context, from the moment the very first strike was launched would the rules of war apply against international law? Because we've seen what Iran has done. Iran has immediately lashed out against the countries in the Gulf, the striking of the U.S. Military bases and also other strategic targets. So how does one measure up international law versus the rules of war that would apply in a situation like this?
Oh yeah, brother. I mean, the rules of war we've commonly understood as one of the core components of international law in terms of what's there in the Geneva Conventions, the international humanitarian law. Those things are pretty clear, and they're so clear that they also make something else very clear, that Israel and the United States virtually violate every single component of these laws, which is one of the reasons why, beyond the larger accusation of genocide that South Africa brought against Israel in the International Court of Justice. Well, within that accusation, what built the content of that accusation were one violation of the rule of war, of rules of war after another. That's what was going on throughout. And of course, when we speak about aggression, the Nuremberg principles were absolutely clear on this. The ultimate crime is that of aggression, but also all of the crimes that ensue from that initial crime. And so we have seen with, let's take specifically, obviously, Iran is the country that we're analyzing in terms of its now the war of aggression waged against it. Iran, over the past 2 years, one can go even beyond, and if we can simply walk away and ignore the propaganda that comes from the United States and Israel, the greatest state sponsor of terrorism, so on and so forth. Ali Khamenei, may God bless his soul, was the most evil man, according to President Trump, Mark Rubio, and all of these characters. If you can debunk that propaganda, or at least put it aside, and then realize that Iran has made every single effort, number one, at negotiations, but whenever they have had to engage in any type of military force, say, for example, after the killing of Major General Qasem Soleimani, again, when they responded, they let the American military bases in Iraq know they were going to fire so they could evacuate. The same thing happened when their embassy was bombed, their retaliation. In the 12-day June war in 2025, same thing. They did not attack Israel. They did not attack the United States. Those countries attacked Iran, and then Iran once again went to at the great pains to avoid civilians. And so right now there's a whole bunch of condemnations, as we all know, of the Iranians launching missiles against various Gulf countries. But this is something they have announced for months, that we have no choice in a situation in which Israel and the United States is attacking us, and you guys host the American military presence in one capacity or another, we're obviously going to attack them. The U.S. says that Iran is producing long-range ballistic missiles. Iran says no, we have no interest in that. We produce these medium-range missiles solely for defense. And then someone like Rubio says, but their missiles can reach our ships. The question is, what are your ships doing there? And so when you're talking about the rules of war, it often seems like the case, those countries and leaders most demonized by the empire and Zionism follow those rules of war much, much better than the actual ones, the aggressors, who of course claim that we have designed the international law and rules of war because these other actors are so malignant.
Yes. Also, Dr. Harun, the fact that the other Arab countries, the GCC, the Gulf countries, have now been drawn into this war. And if we want to take a step back, and we know for a very long time, many of us have been talking about these US bases that have been stationed all around the Middle East. And just looking at some of the statements that came out from Donald Trump as well, where it appears, and I think some of the Arab leadership starting to make certain noises hinting at the fact that the United States is not there to protect the Arab interests, but rather it's acting in the interest of Israel. Just how delusional have these Arabs been by allowing America, to have their bases? And now we see how those bases are being targeted, but not only targeted as well, also providing some sort of support to America to try and obviously protect, their interests, their interests in terms of both, from a governance perspective, their leadership, protecting the monarchies or the kingdoms, or whatever one can actually call it. Just how delusional have these Arabs been? And I'm sure, yeah, in itself, there is a big lesson that, possibly America cannot, well, definitely America can never ever be trusted to protect you. If you could unmute your mic, please.
Oh yes, sorry about that. Yes, these GCC countries, all six of the GCC countries host American bases, and it was very clear at the beginning that despite their protestation that they would not allow any attacks from their bases, that this war was planned and is being executed from their bases, especially that of the UAE. And all of those GCC countries, their very existence, their illegitimate throne is being is as a direct result of those bases. It was meant to serve as a form of protection, not only against external threats, but also from internal threats as well within their countries. Now, we've seen the Saudi Arabia, there have been some murmurings that, those THAAD, missile defense systems were moved from Saudi Arabia towards Israel to protect Israel. So they are now feeling hard done by, because Riyadh is being attacked, the military bases are being attacked in Riyadh, and these were meant to be a form of protection. Basically those bases are a form of protection money. That these GCC countries pay towards the United States to protect the interests of the Zionist entity. So now there's going to be some hard questions asked internally in these countries, particularly by the citizens of those countries. Even those who are supporters of the regimes, that you pay an arm and a leg for protection from the United States, yet in your hour of need, and in your hour of need, the Americans didn't protect you. I mean, Saudi Arabia is being hit hard. The Emirates is by far being hit, is being harder. Bahrain, the small entity, which is not too far from Iran, has been hit the hardest, in my opinion. Yet, they host these major bases. So, this war is also exposing the double standards and the hypocrisy of this. Ultimately, it is the interest of Israel. It's always Israel first to the Americans, despite the millions or trillion in the case of Saudi Arabia can pay in terms of investments and so on. It is ultimately Israel first, and the protection of these GCC countries comes afterwards. If after this war that they cannot ask and answer this difficult question, then ultimately there is no hope for these countries. They either will collapse by the weight of the internal contradictions or the external contradictions. And this is ultimately the hypocrisy that is being exposed by this war to these GCC countries, which I think are going to pay even heavier prices in the days and weeks ahead.
Well, we're going to go for a quick break, Prof. Junaid, Dr. Jazbhay, and Taufeeq. We'll be back immediately after this. Well, we continue with our special broadcast this evening on this 15th night of Ramadan. And we trust and hope that you're still enjoying the beauty of this month of Ramadan. But a large part of the Muslim Ummah clearly are not, and particularly in the Middle East, considering what is taking place in Iran at this point in time, and also in many other parts around the Muslim world. And clearly, there is a lot of concern as to what is happening. And with my guest tonight, Professor Junaid Ahmed, Dr. Ahmed Harun Jazbhay, and Taufeeq Hoosen. Prof. Junaid, just to continue and just to look at it from an Iranian perspective, and it is clear that particularly in the Muslim world, whether we're talking about the Arab world, we're talking about the GCC, the Gulf states, and even countries like Turkey, where Iran is now being perceived as somewhat of a pariah state. And one needs to just understand the justification behind this thought and what do the Arab states or the Muslim world think of Iran right now. We know there has been history. We know what has happened in Syria. We know the support that they had given to Bashar al-Assad as well. And it does appear that this is the discussion, this is the debate that is taking place in Muslim circles. I've seen many a press release, even from scholars, from scholarly bodies, scholarly organizations as well, where to an extent, I think one actually said that one shouldn't be mourning even the death or the murder or the assassination or the killing or martyrdom of Ayatollah Khamenei as well. Just, how should we be looking at this? Because this is how Iran is perceived from some quarters.
No, absolutely, and I think that we should be distinguishing from what some actors, elite actors, in fact, some in the, you can say, in the ulama as well, are claiming that what Iran is, or the Iranian people, or what the Iranian project is, and Ali Khamenei, what he was all about. We have to distinguish that between the way it's actually been received, this war on Iran, and the assassination of Ali Khamenei. And the second part is being viewed by the populations of the Muslim world as a moment of deep mourning, of deep anger and rage, and in fact, a spark for not only within Iran to continue to resist, but outside of Iran as well. I think that this is an old project that obviously began right from the revolution in 1979. That is to say, we often forget that because elite actors at that time, principally the Gulf monarchies, wanted to just portray it as this virulently Shia political revolution that was a threat to all of the other countries that had Sunni majorities, where in fact that was completely not the main reason. The main reason was the Iranian revolution was an anti-monarchical revolution, and that's what obviously all of these Gulf monarchies feared. So at that time, the only way they could deal with this political movement is to basically hype up the sectarian card. Well, these are, horrible Shias, Sahaba hating Shia, all of that nonsense and that propaganda that they try to infuse in their societies. But that we have to remember that original moment really united lots of Sunnis and Shias, in South Africa. No one was looking at it as a sectarian lens, but as a political revolutionary movement against dictatorship. Then in 2006, when the Israelis invaded Lebanon and suffered a horrible defeat at the hands of Hezbollah and their incredible leader, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, who was also assassinated. That was another moment. Shias, Sunnis throughout the Muslim world were very much inspired by a movement, Hassan Nasrallah and Hezbollah, largely Shia. And that, again, frightened the hell out of all of these conservative regimes. And I think that this is another moment. The pariah status, that type of talk that has been imported, obviously, from Washington and Israel and London and so on and so forth. I think that's really collapsed. That narrative has collapsed. And I think that the Israeli genocide in Gaza, it's not only, I think, the populations. Many of the governments also have to are recognizing and articulating this, that the only pariah state really we see in the region is Israel. And we see what it has done and continues to do that actually threatens our rule. We have to remember, for all of their faults, and there's so many, these Gulf regimes also had been, particularly Saudi Arabia, had been on the path of somewhat of a rapprochement facilitated by the Chinese with Iran. So, so the idea that they were gung-ho proponents of this war, I think, is mistaken. Despite there's a Washington Post article that said that behind the scenes, MBS was also calling Trump to wage this war. No, I'm not sure if that's true. But the point is, it doesn't make sense for them to be behind a war that, as we are now seeing, is destabilizing all of these countries. And as you said, the military presence in these American military presence is also being exposed for its just absolutely inability or unwillingness to protect these countries. So rather than being a form of protection, the American military presence is like a magnet for outside attack. And I'll just say one more thing. In Pakistan, many people, and by the way, here as well, massive kind of protest uprising, not Shias, in fact, primarily Sunni. So it's beyond sectarian, and that's what actually threatens rulers. But the one thing that they're saying here is that, thank God, former prime minister, very popular still, Imran Khan, refused to have any military or CIA presence in Pakistan. And we should remember, they have been there forever, and especially during the war on terror. Khan said, get out, because people here are saying that, well, if we had that, maybe we'd be attacked right now as well. But thank goodness we're not.
Well, certainly. And also, I think, Dr. Harun, history has taught us many a lesson, whether we're talking about the ousting of Saddam Hussein, even in Libya with Muammar Gaddafi. And there was a very interesting piece that was written by the daughter of Muammar Gaddafi, Aisha Gaddafi, where she speaks about negotiating with a wolf will not save the sheep or bring lasting peace. It only sets the day for the next meal. And the next meal today is Iran.
Yeah, of course. It's a lazy argument. It's a form of cognitive dissonance, but to go down the route of sectarian divide, Sunni Shia. It's a very lazy. We move way past this a long time ago. And what many of these ulama bodies and other body states in the Gulf do not realize is that if they're successful with Iran, they are going to move one by one to those Sunni Arab countries in the region, because ultimately it is about the Greater Israel Project, and which encompasses, we've been over this, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, Iran, Iraq, Saudi Arabia. I think maybe one or two more. So they are merely delaying the inevitable right now, or trying to hold on to their illegitimate thrones by assisting the Americans, and those bodies who are now go down the lazy route of just blaming this on sectarian divisions cannot see further than their noses, to be honest, because the Sunni majority are going to be next should they are successful with Iran. So we need to move beyond this. Support for Iran is not a theological support. Okay, support for Gaddafi wasn't a theological support. Support for against the war on Iraq in 2003 was not theological support. It was political support. Okay, that this is qualified support, because ultimately, once they're done with this country, if we are going to give the green light to Iraq, to Iran, to Afghanistan, soon it's going to be UAE, soon it's going to be Bahrain and Saudi Arabia and so on. So we must necessarily have that foresight to understand and not fall into the sectarian divide, that this is more about Greater Israel and Israel first, and we need to resist that. Support Iran, not just support its theology if you don't want to, but support it because they finished with Venezuela. They're going after Cuba. They want to finish Iran. It's about neutralizing the global South to ensure the dominance of white supremacy, to ensure the dominance of the Western world, because it has been in terminal decline, and this is an effort to arrest that, to try to arrest that terminal decline.
Yes, Dr. Harun. Taufeeq, I know you've, early on you spoke about the economic consequences, and we've already starting to see a lot starting to play out. The oil price, the Strait of Hormuz, very, very strategic. We've heard Donald Trump talking about a naval escort through the Strait of Hormuz, and I'm not too sure whether he will succeed or not, or he's just being delusional, the usual Donald Trump that we've actually come to know as well. But clearly this has got grave economic consequences, not only for the world, but if we can even just cite the United Arab Emirates as an example. And, the entire world obviously itching to get into Abu Dhabi and into Dubai. And today we see this country come at a standstill.
Okay. With regards, I was actually going to bring up the Strait of Hormuz in terms of the oil trade. And we must also draw back to the kidnapping of President Maduro. And, basically, the motive is actually oil and the petrodollar. You see, America is going under a very financial crisis right now. So they must do something to actually, balance the scale. So I think these desperate moves actually. And then with regards to the second thing you actually mentioned, can you just repeat the second thing?
I spoke about the Strait of Hormuz, and I spoke about Dubai, about the economic.
Oh, right. Okay. With Dubai, you see, what nobody's actually mentioning is the proxy war. And the proxy war need not look in isolation, just the Middle East. We need to look at the proxy war in terms of Africa as well. And America has its proxies throughout the world. And if you look at even I'll say it outright that India-Pakistan conflict, India is a proxy of America as well. So, and then we actually go down to take it one step further and go down to the BRICS agenda. The BRICS agenda actually plays a major role in what's actually going down between and what's actually, basically Trump's behavior now is actually what can we say? It's a strong arm tactic into nations, into strong arming them into economic leverage. We can say, even in South Africa, we have our factors at least. We can go into detail like that if you wish.
Yes. From today, let's just look at America internally. Now, since Trump has taken office, we know a lot has been taking place. The Epstein files, everybody knows it's been a major talking point as well. And that obviously has huge potential of bringing the Trump government down. It actually did at up to a certain stage became a major talking point. And internally for America and American domestically, I mean, we've also heard that well over 50% of Americans are anti this aggression that America has now gone against Iran. They are concerned what this is going to do to America, what it is costing America. We're talking of billions of dollars of military hardware and equipment against cheaper Chinese, arms and missiles that until now Iran has been using as well. And this obviously is having a devastating effect and impact as well. And to the extent we've even seen people like Mamdani issue very, very strong statements against this aggression. Where does this leave America internally, considering that Trump has been a power unto himself? He hasn't gone through Congress. He's issued unilateral tariffs against countries. We see what has happened with Spain as well. Spain has refused America from using its airspace. We've seen Trump retaliating by threats. All of this playing out. Where does this leave America internally from a political perspective, but also in terms of a superpower, in terms of how America is now being seen both internally and the rest of the world?
Well, brother, this is, I think, one of the key issues in this entire war on Iran by the United States and Israel, the internal issues confronting Donald Trump. We should remember that this is the first time in the entire political career of Donald Trump, his first 4 years and now his second term, in which you have seen a dramatic decline of his popularity. Because this guy has always been able to be this con man and fool everybody, and he's popular. So this is the first time we've seen it go dramatically down. And of course, the immediate catalyst for that has been the release of the Epstein emails, but also even before that, the Trump idea of MAGA, Make America Great Again, increasingly has been seen by its base as MIGA, Make Israel Great Again. All of the promises, I mean, inflation continues through the roof, and now the final nail in the coffin of whatever support Trump had is this war on Iran. This is the president that had won the first time and this time on the basis of being opposed to these forever wars waged by his predecessors, Bush, Obama, and so on. And now it seems he's more than willing to get into that. So I think that one of the interesting developments, as we've all probably been following, is the internal civil war taking place within his own party, within the Republican Party, and especially his base, the MAGA base, again, which had no idea, I mean, in defense of that base, of the very cozy relationship between the United States and Israel. And during the genocide in Gaza, it became very difficult to conceal that. So you have this internal, civil war going on. Trump specifically, I think that how we need to see Trump at this particular point is this. I mean, he's always been transactional. He knows this is his last 2-3 years. It's full on corruption, transactional relationships with whether the Gulf regimes and so on and so forth. I mean, you see this. Everything becomes an issue of real estate. The political problems of Gaza and Israel, Palestine, it's about real estate. So this is what Trump has been up to. I just want to say, so we have to realize kind of there's an immediate cause and there's a long-standing cause behind what's going on in Iran. The immediate one, as everyone has been saying, is that complete Zionist control and their objective of the Greater Israel Project. Because we should think about that. All of these Gulf rulers, from whom Trump himself personally and his family getting billions, if not trillions, yet still the Zionists and Netanyahu won that battle. It's an interesting, that's a very interesting thing. The other thing is not to let the empire off the hook. We all know that since 79, the United States, through sanctions, proxies, all sorts of sabotage, has wanted to get rid of the Iranian government. And so these two converged at this particular point. The other thing I just wanted to quickly emphasize is that in the midst of these Gulf countries protesting against the Iranian missiles, and the country of Bahrain, host of the Fifth Fleet, is a very interesting run. We're not hearing much about it, though we should. There's literally like a revolution going on right now. Mass protests. In fact, it was quite embarrassing for the government. They welcomed the missiles. And you see the Saudis going in Bahrain, just like what happened during the Arab Spring, to suppress that. So these are some of the issues that are going on. And just because the Pakistan angle, I mean, I think I'd be remiss not to emphasize it. And brother, you had also mentioned it at the beginning. One thing we have to realize is whether it's Turkey or Pakistan, whatever regime they have, and God knows I despise the current regime in Pakistan, they also understand that Israel is going after basically any power in the country that can put some type of formidable threat to it. Iran was the most obvious one in its support for Palestine, but so is Turkey and Pakistan. Pakistan, fifth largest country, sixth largest military, nuclear armed. So as much as Trump will guarantee to Pakistan, hey, we're all in the same, the Pakistanis don't trust the Israelis for good reason. The issue with Afghanistan has been the following. I mean, this is the incredible paradox of history. During the war on terror years, every government in Afghanistan, of Karzai, Ashraf Ghani, and the Americans would say what? Pakistan is harboring these Taliban terrorist characters that come across the border and commit these acts against us. The same claim Pakistan, ironically, is making today. The Taliban in Afghanistan are harboring TTP and other terrorists that come across the border and attack us. The point I'm trying to make is that we have to kind of move beyond this immediate response reaction to kind of Afghanistan. This is the larger context. These forces have been groomed for decades, and that is what Pakistan is dealing with now. Its proxies going rogue.
Well, certainly the case. Dr. Harun, in the absence of decisive international law, with a UN Security Council and other international bodies impotent, and they have been for a very, very long time. The key issue here is looking at it from a Israeli perspective, the Zionist entity. We've heard Netanyahu has been very, very quiet in the last few days as well. But also at the same time, what this is doing to Israel's society. And the reason why I'm asking this question is we know that even with Gaza and the genocide and what had taken place a few months ago with Iran and the missiles that were fired into Israel, and we see that they are still obviously causing a fair amount of damage in Israel. These are people who have got a place to run, because this is exactly what they do. The moment they come under attack, they run. They leave for Germany. They come to South Africa. They'll go to Greece. They're going to go all over the world. They're going to run away. Iran, at this point in time, Iran has got absolutely nothing to lose. Iran has got their country. Just, how determined do you think are the Iranians in the absence of international law being able to do something about it? How determined are the Iranians to hold on and take this thing as far as they can?
Yeah, for the Iranians, and I mentioned this in an engagement with the Iranian ambassador last night to South Africa, where I stated that, this is a war to the end. It's either Iran repels these threats permanently, the US and Israeli threats, and repels being where the US and Israel are no longer a threat to it, or this is going to be the end of the Islamic Republic. This is an existential war for Iran, the existential war for the Islamic Republic and the revolution of 1979. So Iranians have now nothing to lose. They had warned the Gulf countries that should they come under attack, they're going to attack the American bases. And the ferocious nature of their retaliation and their response shows that they viewed this as an existential threat. So Iran has nothing to lose. The Israelis will flee. We know during the genocide in Gaza, up to 500,000, fled to European countries, many to Russia and other European countries, because they hold second passport, and the majority of those didn't return. The Iranians have they have nowhere to go. Their passport is very weak. They have nowhere to go. So they realize that this is the existential war. They are fighting to the end. However that would pan out, they will be fighting to the end. This is an existential war for the Islamic Republic of Iran. They understand that. I simply hope that after this is all done and dusted, that they will pursue a nuclear weapon, because their biggest mistake that they made in the last 47 years was not to pursue a nuclear weapon. We know why North Korea it doesn't come under attack, because they have nuclear weapons. So Iran, to avoid an existential threat in future, needs to pursue a nuclear weapon, because now they negotiated in good faith in June last year. They came under attack. They negotiated in good faith now in February. They came under attack. Why do they keep negotiating? This should be the end of negotiation for Iran. It's because they have nowhere to go, and this should be a fight to the end.
Yes, I see we've got a few minutes. In fact, we're almost time is up. Just very quickly, I'm going to go around. Taufeeq, final thoughts from you. Then I'll go to Prof. Junaid, and I'll ask Dr. Harun Jazbhay for his final thoughts.
I'm just going to reflect on what Dr. Ahmed said, and indeed, the red flags have been raised, and they talk of the black flags actually. We're not me to go down into detail to that. But I would like to actually, you see, I actually drafted something earlier, which actually is this. I'm just going to go over it. Basically, I call for the immediate de-escalation. Second, the protection of the nuclear non-proliferation regime. Third, the restoration of structured diplomacy. Fourth, the reinforcement of international law. And fifth, the global responsibility of multilateral unity. So if we have to go onto these 5 steps and actually address each step, it's only then we're going to actually go forward with what's actually thinking. And then we must also reflect on yesterday. I didn't get actually an update, but from what I hear, Cuba and South Africa actually took stuff up with the Hague. So we must actually follow up with that and get our civil bodies to actually support it. And as South Africans, we subscribe to the Freedom Charter, and we must always remember that and stick to the humanity cause and iron out all the propaganda and the factors of religion and but even the Zionist factor as well. We should stick to humanity for now. And yeah, I would like to close with that. Thank you.
Shukran. Jazakallah khairan so much for that, Prof. Junaid. Just final thought, and also, what would actually bring an end to what we are witnessing right now?
Yes, thank you, brother, and this has been quite an illuminating discussion with all of you. There's one thing that needs to be emphasized here, that while it seems like the United States and Israel are, hand in glove and have the same agenda, there is minor difference here. I think the United States, even in Syria and all of these other places, was interested in regime change. And of course, we actually don't know what that means. They continue to say that about Iran, whatever that means. With the Israelis, you're actually pretty clear what they want. They want complete destruction of the regime, destabilization of the society, fragmentation. Syria is the best example for this. So everyone would say that they want regime change. I said maybe Washington. Israel doesn't care. It wants the society, it wants Arabs and Muslims just to be killing each other. So I think that that's the end game for Israel right now. And I think the Iranians understand that. We also have to recognize, and in terms of for our own advantage and in terms of our own activism and interventions, that this is a very unpopular war. Even within the United States and Western publics, Brother Inayat pointed that statistic out. We must remember that in the past, the war on Iraq, of course, that post 9/11 atmosphere, they were able to mobilize popular sentiment. This time, it's not there. I think, again, a consequence, positive one, I think, of the genocide of Gaza. So that's something we need to take advantage of. And the final thing is, the way the Iranians have responded time and time again, they have gotten the sympathy of a lot of people who were never aligned with the Iranian state. When I, for example, have told friends of mine involved in the peace and justice group that why Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons, because there was a fatwa issued that says that this is fundamentally incompatible with Islam. These were the reasons, and people are like amazed. I think that's what we need to build on that mass sentiment, I think, throughout the world. While governments may say one thing or the other, everyone knows how bankrupt, not just our Gulf countries, but even the European countries are right now. But just like in Gaza, there's widespread support and solidarity with the Iranians. And I think that that's something we need to continue to build on.
Shukran for that, Dr. Harun. Final thoughts.
Yeah, this is unlikely to be a short war. I know the Americans want it to be a short war. It's election year, midterm elections. This is unlikely to be a short war. Iran wants to repel these threats once and for all, and it needs international support. I know many countries are tiptoeing, including South Africa, around supporting them publicly against this illegal war. And it's an illegal war. It was never a preemptive strike, illegal war. And we again we must shy away from the sectarian divides and ensure that we rally behind Iran, because if Iran is successfully eliminated, the rest of us are coming. They're coming after the rest of us. It's not going to end with Iran.
Well, shukran. Jazakallah khairan so much for that to you, Prof. Junaid Ahmed, to you, Dr. Ahmed, Harun Jazbhay, and also Taufeeq Hoosen. Jazakallah to all of you. Have yourself a wonderful Ramadan. The next 2 weeks, inshallah. But I'm sure at some point in time we will touch base. But for now, we certainly do appreciate all three of you taking time out with us right here on Salam Media. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Well, that brings us to the end of tonight's special broadcast. And as we mentioned, this will come to you every Wednesday evening, inshallah, after the Taraweeh Salah, where we will have these panel discussions to keep our listeners, our viewers updated during the month of Ramadan on the latest developments. And with that, I'm going to be signing off once again. An absolute pleasure being in your company. We trust and hope that you continue enjoying the blessings and the mercy of this beautiful month of Ramadan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all your efforts, all your ibadah, your salat, your taraweehs, your fasting, your charity. But at the end of the day, also, it is a month of the Quran, but it is also a month of unity as well. And also at the same time, we need to identify with the oppression that continues to take place right across the entire world. I know we've been talking about Iran tonight, but the oppression still continues in Gaza as well. How many Ramadans have come, Ramadans have gone, and nothing has changed for the people of Gaza. So spare thought for them, spare thought for the people of Sudan, for Kashmir, the Rohingya, and right across the entire world. There's just so much, and never have we seen, especially in the month of Ramadan, as I mentioned right at the very outset, so many Muslim countries involved in a war, in a conflict situation in this month of Ramadan. Something for us to think about. And with that, I'm signing off. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.